Standing backstage at Lincoln Center, I watched my sister Ophelia crumble during her piano recital, the performance that was supposed to secure her Juilliard scholarship. 27 years of being called the worker bee while she was the golden child had led to this moment. Mom always said I was useful but unremarkable, while Ophelia was destined for greatness. But as my sister fled the stage in tears, leaving behind a room full of confused donors and critics, I realized everything I believed about our family hierarchy was about to shatter completely. Hey everyone! Before we dive into this wild family revenge story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. If you have ever felt overlooked by your own family, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more dramatic stories about family karma. Trust me, what happens next will completely change how you view family favoritism forever. You will not believe the shocking truth I discovered about why Mom always treated us so differently. My name is Serafina, and for 27 years, I believed I was the forgettable middle child. Mom had made it crystal clear from childhood that I was the dependable one, good for household chores, reliable for errands, useful for supporting Ophelia's endless stream of piano competitions and music camps, while my younger sister received standing ovations and scholarship opportunities. I worked two jobs to help fund her musical education. The night of Ophelia's Lincoln Center disaster changed everything. After she ran off stage during the second movement of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, I found myself cleaning up the mess literally and figuratively. The event coordinator was furious, donors were demanding explanations, and Mom was having what could only be described as a complete nervous breakdown in the green room. $20,000, Mom kept repeating, rocking back and forth. $20,000 down the drain. How could she just freeze like that? I spent 3 hours apologizing to distinguished guests, coordinating refunds, and managing the crisis, while Mom sat paralyzed and Ophelia remained locked in a bathroom stall. It was not until I was packing up Ophelia's sheet music that I found the first piece of the puzzle, a bank statement that had fallen from Mom's purse. The statement showed a checking account with over $200,000. This confused me because Mom had spent years claiming we were barely scraping by, constantly asking me to contribute more money for Ophelia's lessons, competition fees, and equipment. I had been working 60-hour weeks between my day job at the accounting firm and weekend shifts at a local restaurant, believing every dollar was crucial for my sister's musical future. Curiosity overtook my better judgment. I took photos of the statement and started digging deeper when I got home that night. Using my accounting background, I began cross-referencing the transactions with family expenses I remembered. What I discovered made my blood run cold. For the past 8 years, Mom had been systematically embezzling money from the small family trust fund that Grandpa had established for all 3 of his grandchildren, me, Ophelia, and our older brother Marcus, who lived across the country. The trust was supposed to be divided equally when we each turned 30, but Mom had been serving as the trustee and had been draining it steadily. The bank statements revealed a pattern of financial manipulation that was breathtaking in its audacity. Mom had been funneling trust money into her personal accounts, then using it for her own expenses, while demanding that I contribute my hard-earned wages to support Ophelia's music career. She had purchased a new car, funded multiple vacations that she claimed were family emergencies, and had even been paying for her own graduate degree in arts administration, something she had never mentioned to any of us. But the most devastating discovery was a series of payments to something called Steinway Educational Consulting. When I researched this company, I found out it was a fake business that Mom had created. She had been billing the trust for thousands of dollars in fake educational consulting fees, while simultaneously telling me that we could not afford proper piano lessons for Ophelia unless I worked extra hours. The manipulation went even deeper. I found emails between Mom and various music teachers where she had been negotiating lower rates and payment plans, then charging the trust the full amount and pocketing the difference. Every competition entry fee that she claimed cost $300 had actually cost $75. Every music camp that supposedly required $2,000 in tuition had actually been partially scholarship funded. My sister Ophelia had been receiving excellent training and opportunities, but not because of my financial sacrifices. The money had always been there. Mom had just been stealing it while making me feel guilty for not contributing enough. She had been using my sense of family loyalty and responsibility to fund her own lifestyle while crying poverty whenever I asked why we could not afford basic things for ourselves. The cruelest part was discovering that Mom had been bad-mouthing me to music teachers and other parents, claiming I was selfish and unsupportive of Ophelia's dreams. She had created an entire narrative where I was the reluctant family member who had to be constantly convinced to help, when in reality, I had been the one sacrificing everything while she stole from all of us. As I sat in my tiny studio apartment at 3 in the morning, surrounded by bank statements and printed emails, I realized that my entire understanding of our family dynamic had been built on lies. I was not the worker bee because I was less talented or less deserving of investment. I was the worker bee because Mom needed someone to exploit while she positioned herself as the devoted mother making sacrifices for her gifted daughter. The most infuriating revelation was that there had been enough money in the trust to support both Ophelia's musical education and my own dreams of going back to school for my CPA certification. Instead, Mom had stolen my future while making me complicit in funding her deception. I spent the rest of that night calculating exactly how much had been stolen. The numbers were staggering. Over $150,000 had been diverted from the trust over 8 years. My personal contributions during that same period totaled nearly $40,000, money I had given up thinking it was necessary for my sister's success, money that could have changed my entire trajectory if I had invested it in my own education and career development. But what hurt most was not the money. It was the realization that every family dinner where Mom praised Ophelia's dedication and subtly criticized my lack of ambition had been a performance designed to maintain her system of exploitation. Every time she had made me feel guilty for wanting to spend money on myself, every time she had suggested that I was being selfish for not contributing more to the family, she had been gaslighting me while literally stealing my inheritance. The betrayal was so complete and systematic that I could barely breathe. This was not just financial fraud, this was emotional and psychological manipulation that had shaped my entire adult life and self-concept. The morning after my discovery, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. I needed time to process the magnitude of Mom's betrayal and figure out my next move. By noon, I had made a decision that would change everything. I was going to expose the truth methodically and completely. My first step was gathering irrefutable evidence. Using my accounting training, I created a comprehensive audit trail of every fraudulent transaction. I cross-referenced Mom's bank statements with the trust documents, cataloged every fake invoice, and documented the pattern of financial abuse. The evidence was overwhelming, but I knew I needed more than just numbers. I needed to understand the full scope of her deception. I drove to Grandpa's house where the original trust documents were stored in his old filing cabinet. Mom had always claimed she was the only one with access to these papers, but Grandpa had given me a key years ago when he started showing signs of dementia. What I found in those files made my blood boil. Mom had been forging signatures on trust modifications, essentially rewriting the terms to give herself broader authority over the funds. She had created fake amendments that increased her management fees and expanded what constituted allowable educational expenses. Most shocking of all, she had backdated documents to make it appear as though these changes had been approved years earlier. But the most damning evidence was a folder labeled insurance. Inside, I found paperwork showing that Mom had taken out life insurance policies on all 3 of her children, with herself as the sole beneficiary. The premiums were being paid from the trust fund, meaning she was using our own inheritance money to bet on our deaths. Armed with this evidence, I made my first strategic move. I contacted Marcus, my older brother, who had moved to California after college and maintained minimal contact with the family. When I called him, I discovered he had his own suspicions about Mom's financial management. "Serafina, I have been wondering about that trust for years," Marcus said during our 3-hour phone conversation. Every time I ask Mom about it, she gives me vague answers and claims there is not much left. She told me Dad's medical bills before he died had wiped out most of it. This was news to me. Mom had never mentioned Dad's medical expenses depleting the trust. In fact, I had seen insurance documents showing that Dad's cancer treatment had been largely covered by his employer's health plan. Another lie designed to manage our expectations and prevent us from asking difficult questions. Marcus and I agreed to meet in person the following weekend. But first, I had to confront Ophelia. My sister had been avoiding the family since her stage meltdown, staying with friends, and refusing to answer Mom's calls. I finally tracked her down at her best friend's apartment. The conversation with Ophelia was heartbreaking. When I showed her the evidence of Mom's fraud, she broke down completely. Through tears, she revealed that she had known something was wrong for months. "The pressure was killing me," Ophelia sobbed. "Mom kept saying that everyone was sacrificing so much for my music, especially you. She would show me bank statements and say we were almost out of money, that I needed to win competitions to justify the expense. Every time I made a mistake in practice, she would remind me how much you were working to support my dreams." My sister had been carrying tremendous guilt, believing that my exhaustion and financial stress were her fault. Mom had been manipulating both of us, making me feel responsible for Ophelia's success while making Ophelia feel guilty for accepting my sacrifices. But Ophelia's revelation went deeper. She had discovered that several of her competition wins had been purchased. Mom had been bribing judges and manipulating contest results to build Ophelia's reputation, using trust money to pay for fake achievements. The Lincoln Center performance was supposed to be Ophelia's first completely legitimate audition, which explained why the pressure had finally broken her. "I could not handle knowing that nothing I had accomplished was real," Ophelia cried. "Every award, every scholarship recommendation, every opportunity, Mom had been buying them. I felt like such a fraud." This explained Mom's panic when Ophelia failed at Lincoln Center. It was not just about the $20,000 for the event, it was about the collapse of an elaborate deception that had taken years to construct. The next day, I made the most difficult decision of my life. I called the police. Detective Rodriguez from the Financial Crimes Unit was surprisingly sympathetic when I presented my evidence. "This is one of the most systematic cases of family trust fraud I have seen," she said after reviewing my documentation. "Your mother has committed multiple felonies, embezzlement, forgery, insurance fraud, and what appears to be organized bribery." The detective explained that prosecuting family financial crimes was complicated, but the evidence I had gathered was comprehensive enough to proceed. She advised me to secure all remaining trust documents and to avoid confronting Mom directly until they could investigate further. But I was not interested in waiting for the legal system. I wanted Mom to face immediate consequences for what she had done to our family. So I made a decision that would escalate everything. I was going to expose her publicly at the venue where her deception had begun to unravel. I contacted the Lincoln Center event coordinator and explained that I had discovered fraud related to the previous week's disaster. I told them I could provide evidence that would explain what had happened with Ophelia's performance and offered to make things right. Intrigued, they agreed to a meeting. The meeting was more productive than I had hoped. The coordinator was frustrated because the event had been a significant embarrassment for the center, and several donors had expressed concern about future funding. When I showed them evidence of Mom's systematic fraud and explained how the pressure of maintaining fake achievements had caused Ophelia's breakdown, they saw an opportunity to salvage the situation. "If you can prove this fraud publicly," the coordinator said, "it would actually help our reputation. We can position ourselves as victims of this deception and show that we take fraud seriously. Plus, if your sister is willing to perform again legitimately this time, we might be able to turn this into a positive story about overcoming family trauma." That evening, I called Marcus and Ophelia for a conference call. I laid out my plan. We were going to confront Mom publicly with evidence, witnesses, and consequences. We would demand full restitution, pursue criminal charges, and rebuild our family relationships based on honesty instead of manipulation. Both siblings agreed immediately. Marcus was angry about years of believing our family was financially struggling while Mom lived comfortably off stolen money. Ophelia was determined to prove she could succeed without purchased achievements. The trap was set. In 3 days, Mom would face the consequences of her decades-long deception, and our family would finally learn what truth looked like. The next 72 hours were a whirlwind of strategic planning and alliance building. Marcus flew in from California, and the three of us, Ophelia, Marcus, and I, met at a coffee shop downtown to coordinate our approach. For the first time in years, we were working together as siblings instead of competing for Mom's approval and attention. Marcus brought his own evidence to the table. As a software engineer, he had been tracking digital breadcrumbs for months, suspicious about Mom's vague financial reports. He had discovered that Mom had been using trust money to pay for her graduate degree, a luxury vacation to Europe she had claimed was a medical consultation trip, and monthly payments to a financial advisor who specialized in hiding assets from family members. "I have been building a case for 6 months," Marcus admitted. "I hired a private investigator after Mom told me there was no money left for my wedding expenses last year. The PI found bank accounts in 3 different states and evidence that she has been planning to disappear with what remains of the trust fund." This revelation hit us like a physical blow. Mom was not just stealing money, she was preparing to abandon the family entirely once the fraud became unsustainable. The private investigator had documented Mom looking at properties in Florida and researching countries with favorable extradition laws. Ophelia contributed her own piece of the puzzle. She had been keeping detailed records of every competition lesson and educational expense that Mom had claimed on her behalf. Cross-referencing these with actual receipts and invoices revealed that Mom had been inflating costs by an average of 300%, sometimes charging the trust fund $5,000 for events that cost $1,500. "The worst part," Ophelia said, "is that I could have achieved the same results for a fraction of the cost. She was not investing in my success. She was using my talent as an excuse to steal money and live beyond her means." Our first major alliance came from an unexpected source, Mom's own financial advisor, Jennifer Walsh. When Marcus contacted her as part of his investigation, she had been waiting for someone from the family to reach out. She had been uncomfortable with Mom's requests for months and had been documenting everything as protection against potential legal issues. "Your mother has been asking me to help her liquidate the remaining trust assets and transfer them to offshore accounts," Jennifer revealed during our meeting. She claimed there was a family emergency and that she needed immediate access to all remaining funds. When I asked for documentation of this emergency, she became hostile and threatened to find another advisor. Jennifer provided us with email exchanges showing Mom's increasing desperation to access money quickly. In recent weeks, she had been asking about converting assets to cash, moving money to untraceable accounts, and even inquiring about changing her legal name. The timeline aligned perfectly with Ophelia's Lincoln Center failure. Mom knew her house of cards was collapsing. But our most valuable ally emerged from an unexpected conversation with Mrs. Patterson, our elderly neighbor who had known our family for 15 years. When I stopped by to check on her garden while gathering my thoughts, she pulled me aside for a conversation that changed everything. "Serafina, I have been worried about your family for years," Mrs. Patterson said. "Your mother has been telling people in the neighborhood that you are financially irresponsible and that she has to support you constantly. But I have seen you working multiple jobs, and I have seen her driving a new car every 2 years while claiming you all are struggling." Mrs. Patterson had been keeping her own informal records of Mom's behavior because she suspected something was wrong. She had witnessed Mom making disparaging comments about me to other neighbors, claiming I was selfish and ungrateful, while simultaneously bragging about her own financial management skills. "She told Mrs. Rodriguez that you refused to help with family expenses and that poor Ophelia might have to give up music because of your selfishness," Mrs. Patterson continued. "But I have seen you giving your mother envelopes of cash multiple times, and I have seen her counting money in her car afterward." This neighbor testimony was crucial because it established a pattern of public deception that went beyond financial fraud. Mom had been systematically destroying my reputation in the community while building sympathy for herself as a struggling single mother with an ungrateful daughter. Our alliance expanded when we contacted Grandpa's former lawyer who had drafted the original trust documents. Attorney Benjamin Clark was now retired, but when we explained the situation, he agreed to review our evidence. What he told us was devastating. The trust your grandfather established was supposed to be untouchable until each grandchild turned 30, Clark explained. Your mother should not have had access to withdraw principal amounts for any reason. The fact that she has been draining the principal while claiming educational expenses suggests she has been violating the fundamental terms of the trust. Clark revealed that he had received several calls from Mom over the years asking about modifying the trust terms, which he had refused to do. When he stopped hearing from her, he assumed she had accepted the limitations. Instead, she had apparently been forging modifications and operating outside the legal framework entirely. The retired attorney agreed to serve as an expert witness and help us navigate the legal process. He also connected us with a current estate attorney who specialized in trust fraud cases. Attorney Maria Santos reviewed our evidence and confirmed that we had grounds for both criminal charges and civil restitution claims. This is a clear case of fiduciary breach and embezzlement, Santos told us. The forged documents alone carry serious felony charges. The systematic nature of the fraud suggests this was planned and deliberate, which makes the penalties much more severe. Our growing alliance now included Marcus Ophelia, the financial advisor, the neighbor witness, two attorneys, and Detective Rodriguez from the Financial Crimes Unit. But we needed one more piece of evidence of ongoing fraud that would justify immediate action. That evidence came from Ophelia's former piano teacher, Dr. Elizabeth Novak, who contacted us after hearing about the Lincoln Center incident through the classical music community. Dr. Novak had taught Ophelia for 2 years before Mom suddenly switched to a more affordable instructor. I always wondered what happened. Dr. Novak told us. Your mother had been paying my full rates on time for months, then suddenly claimed she could not afford lessons and needed to find someone cheaper. But I saw her driving an expensive new car that same week. Dr. Novak had been charging $200 per lesson, which Mom had been paying promptly from the trust fund. But trust records showed charges of $450 per lesson during that same period, meaning Mom was stealing an extra $250 weekly while making Ophelia believe we could not afford quality instruction. The piano teacher also revealed that Mom had approached her about writing fake recommendation letters for Ophelia's college applications, offering to pay for testimonials about achievements that never happened. When Dr. Novak refused, Mom had abruptly ended the lessons and spread rumors in the music community that the teacher was unprofessional and money-hungry. This pattern of destroying relationships when people refused to participate in her fraud was consistent with everything else we had discovered. Mom was not just a thief, she was a systematic manipulator who turned people against each other to maintain her deceptions. By the end of the week, we had assembled a coalition of witnesses, evidence, and legal support that made Mom's guilt undeniable. But more importantly, we had rebuilt the sibling relationships that her manipulation had damaged. For the first time in years, Marcus, Ophelia, and I were working together toward a common goal. The plan was set. The following Monday, we would confront Mom with all evidence, all witnesses, and all legal consequences ready to deploy. Detective Rodriguez would be standing by to make arrests if necessary. Attorney Santos would be prepared to file immediate civil claims to freeze remaining assets. But first, we had one final piece of the puzzle to put in place, ensuring that Mom could not escape or destroy evidence once she realized the game was over. Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitable confrontation. We had arranged to meet Mom at her house at 10 a.m., ostensibly to discuss family finances following Ophelia's Lincoln Center situation. Marcus, Ophelia, and I arrived together, our evidence organized in neat folders, our legal team on standby, and Detective Rodriguez parked discreetly down the street. But as we approached the front door, something felt wrong. The house was too quiet, and Mom's car was not in the driveway. When we used my key to enter, we found a scene that made our hearts sink. The house had been systematically emptied of anything valuable. Family photographs remained on the walls, but jewelry, electronics, important documents, and even small furniture pieces were gone. In the kitchen, we found a note addressed to me in Mom's familiar handwriting. Serafina, I know what you think you have discovered. We need to talk privately before you make a terrible mistake. The note provided an address for a storage unit facility across town and a time 2 p.m. that afternoon. It was signed Love Mom with a heart drawn next to her name, the same way she had signed birthday cards when I was a child. Against Marcus's strong objections, I decided to meet her. We agreed that I would go alone, but that Marcus and Ophelia would wait in the parking lot with Detective Rodriguez nearby. If I did not emerge within 30 minutes, they would come looking for me. The storage facility was in a run-down part of town, surrounded by abandoned buildings and overgrown lots. I found the unit number Mom had specified and discovered her waiting inside, surrounded by boxes of household items and looking smaller and more fragile than I remembered. You always were too smart for your own good, Mom said when she saw me. Her voice carried none of the warmth or manipulation I was used to. Instead, she sounded tired and defeated. What happened next blindsided me completely. Mom pulled out a thick manila folder and handed it to me without explanation. Inside were documents I had never seen before: medical bills, insurance claims, and bank statements going back 12 years. Your father did not die of cancer, Serafina, Mom said quietly. He died of complications from alcoholism. The medical bills were real, but they were not covered by insurance because his drinking was considered a pre-existing condition that he had hidden from his employer. The documents showed a devastating financial picture. Dad's treatment had indeed cost over $200,000, but that was not the worst part. The papers revealed that Dad had been stealing money from the family trust for years before his death, funding a gambling addiction that Mom had discovered only after he was gone. I found out 3 days after the funeral that your father had emptied our savings account and taken a second mortgage on the house, Mom continued. He had been forging my signature on documents and had stolen almost $50,000 from the trust before I even became the trustee. My hands were shaking as I read through evidence of Dad's systematic financial abuse of the family. Bank records showed regular withdrawals for gambling loan documents with forged signatures and credit cards opened in Mom's name without her knowledge. The trust fund that I thought had originally contained $400,000 had actually been reduced to less than $200,000 before Mom ever gained access. But the most shocking document was a suicide note that Dad had written but never sent. In it, he confessed to the gambling addiction, the theft, and his plan to take out life insurance policies on the children to pay back what he had stolen. He had been planning to kill himself to collect insurance money to cover his debts. I found this note in his desk after the funeral, Mom said, tears streaming down her face. I realized that everything I thought I knew about our marriage and our finances was a lie. I was left with massive debts, 3 children to support, and a trust fund that your father had already been stealing from for years. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Everything I thought I knew about my family's financial situation was wrong again, but this time in a completely different direction. Mom had not started the deception, she had inherited it, and had been trying to manage the aftermath of Dad's betrayal. Why did you not tell us? I whispered, struggling to process this new information. Because I was ashamed, Mom replied. I was ashamed that I had not noticed what your father was doing. I was ashamed that I could not provide for you the way I wanted. And I was terrified that if you knew the truth about your father, it would destroy your memories of him. But then Mom pulled out another folder and my sympathy began to crumble. This folder contained evidence of her own crimes: forged trust modifications, fake invoices, and bank statements showing systematic theft over the past 3 years. I started taking money from the trust because I was desperate, Mom admitted. The house was going into foreclosure and I could not keep up with your father's debts. I told myself it was temporary, that I would pay it back when things got better. The financial records showed that Mom's theft had indeed started as small amounts to cover legitimate emergencies, But over time, the amounts had grown larger, and the justifications had become weaker. Recent withdrawals were clearly for personal expenses that had nothing to do with family needs. "But that does not excuse what you did to us," I said, my voice growing stronger. "You made me feel guilty for wanting to invest in my own life. You manipulated Ophelia into believing her success depended on my sacrifices. You turned us against each other while you were stealing from all of us." Mom's face crumpled. "I know. I know what I became, and I hate myself for it. But Serafina, there is something else you need to know before you turn me in to the police." She handed me one final document that made my blood run cold. It was a medical report showing that Mom had been diagnosed with early-stage dementia 6 months earlier. The progressive cognitive decline explained some of her increasingly erratic financial decisions and her growing paranoia about being discovered. "The doctor says I have maybe 2 years before I lose the ability to manage my own affairs," Mom said. "I was trying to secure enough money to pay for care without becoming a burden to you children. I know that does not excuse what I did, but I was scared and desperate and not thinking clearly." Standing in that storage unit, surrounded by the remnants of our family's life, I realized that there were no clear villains in this story. Dad had been a gambling addict who had stolen from his family. Mom had been a widow trying to manage impossible circumstances who had made increasingly bad decisions. And I had been so focused on exposing Mom's crimes that I had not considered the complexity of what had driven her to commit them. But despite the explanations and medical diagnoses, the fundamental facts remained unchanged. Mom had stolen money, manipulated her children, and destroyed family relationships through years of systematic deception. The reasons might be understandable, but the consequences were still devastating. The 30-minute deadline was approaching, and I could hear Marcus and Detective Rodriguez calling my name from outside the storage facility. I had to make a decision about what to do with this new information and how it changed everything I thought I knew about seeking justice for my family. When Marcus and Detective Rodriguez found me in the storage unit, I was sitting on a box of old photo albums, surrounded by documents that had turned my understanding of our family upside down again. Mom had disappeared while I was processing her revelations, leaving behind only a note saying she would be staying with her sister in Arizona until we decided what to do with the information she had shared. Detective Rodriguez examined the new evidence with professional skepticism. While Dad's gambling addiction and Mom's dementia diagnosis provided context for the financial crimes, they did not eliminate the legal consequences of systematic theft and fraud. Diminished capacity might be relevant during sentencing, but it does not negate the crimes, Detective Rodriguez explained. And your father's previous theft does not justify your mother's subsequent actions. We still have clear evidence of embezzlement, forgery, and fraud spanning multiple years. But as we drove back to discuss this development with Ophelia and our legal team, I received a phone call that would introduce the most important ally in our quest for justice. The caller was Dr. Sarah Chen, a geriatric psychiatrist who specialized in financial elder abuse cases. "I understand your mother was recently diagnosed with dementia," Dr. Chen said. "Her sister contacted me because she was concerned about some financial irregularities and wanted to understand whether cognitive decline might be a factor." Dr. Chen explained that she had been studying the intersection of dementia and financial crimes for over a decade. What she told us was both illuminating and disturbing. Early-stage dementia often manifests as poor financial judgment and increased susceptibility to making impulsive decisions, Dr. Chen said. However, it also creates a situation where people can appear competent while actually having significantly impaired reasoning abilities. And the psychiatrist had reviewed Mom's medical records and wanted to conduct a comprehensive cognitive assessment. More importantly, she had experience helping families navigate the legal and ethical complexities of prosecuting someone with degenerative brain disease. When we met with Dr. Chen the following day, she brought something unexpected: expertise in financial crimes committed by people with cognitive impairment, and a network of resources for families dealing with similar situations. "Your mother's case is unfortunately not unique," Dr. Chen explained. I have worked with dozens of families where a parent with early dementia committed financial crimes while trying to manage complex circumstances they were no longer capable of handling properly. But Dr. Chen also brought uncomfortable news. After reviewing all our evidence, she believed that Mom's most systematic and sophisticated crimes, the forged trust documents, the elaborate fake business schemes, the manipulation of competition results had occurred before her dementia symptoms would have been significantly impairing her judgment. The timeline suggests that your mother was fully competent when she began the most serious fraudulent activities, Dr. Chen said. The dementia may have made her decision-making worse in recent months, but it cannot explain or excuse the systematic nature of the fraud that began 3 years ago. This assessment was confirmed by Marcus's private investigator, who had been continuing his research independently. The investigator had uncovered evidence that Mom had been researching how to embezzle from family trusts and hide assets as early as 4 years ago, well before any cognitive symptoms would have appeared. She was planning this systematically, the investigator reported. I found internet searches on her computer going back years, looking up information about trust fraud, money laundering, and countries with favorable extradition laws. This was not impulsive behavior caused by medical issues, this was deliberate criminal planning. But our most surprising ally came from within the classical music community. Dr. Elizabeth Novak, Ophelia's former piano teacher, had been conducting her own investigation after our previous conversation. She had discovered a network of parents and music educators who had suspected Mom of fraudulent activities for years. Your mother was not just buying achievements for Ophelia, Dr. Novak revealed during a meeting with several other music professionals. She was running a broader scheme offering to pay judges and contest organizers to manipulate results for other families as well. The music teacher had documented at least 6 other families who had been approached by Mom with offers to guarantee competition wins in exchange for substantial payments. Some had refused, but others had participated, creating a web of corruption that extended far beyond our family situation. She was essentially running a pay-to-win scheme in the regional classical music competition circuit, another teacher explained. Parents would pay her thousands of dollars, and she would use those payments plus money stolen from your trust to bribe judges and manipulate contest results. This revelation meant that Mom's crimes were significantly more extensive than we had initially discovered. She had been operating what amounted to a criminal enterprise using our family trust as seed money to build a broader fraud operation that victimized multiple families in the music community. The music educators had been afraid to come forward individually because they lacked concrete evidence and feared retaliation from Mom, who had demonstrated a pattern of destroying the reputations of people who opposed her. But together they could provide testimony about a systematic pattern of criminal behavior that went far beyond simple family financial disputes. Dr. Chen helped us understand the full implications of these discoveries. Your mother was functioning as a criminal entrepreneur, she said. The dementia may be affecting her current decision-making, but it cannot explain the sophisticated criminal enterprise she built over several years. Armed with this expanded evidence and expert testimony, Attorney Santos was able to build a much stronger case. We now had proof of crimes affecting multiple families, expert medical testimony about cognitive capacity, and a timeline showing deliberate criminal planning that preceded any dementia symptoms. But perhaps most importantly, we had found a way to seek justice that acknowledged the complexity of our situation. Dr. Chen connected us with a restorative justice program that specialized in family financial crimes involving elderly perpetrators. Rather than focusing solely on punishment, restorative justice emphasizes repairing harm and preventing future crimes, Dr. Chen explained. In cases involving cognitive decline, this approach often produces better outcomes for everyone involved. The restorative justice mediator, Rebecca Martinez, specialized in cases where family relationships needed to be rebuilt after financial abuse. She helped us develop a plan that would hold Mom accountable for her crimes while also addressing the underlying family dynamics that had made the fraud possible. Justice does not always look like prison time, Martinez explained. Sometimes justice looks like full financial restitution, public acknowledgement of wrongdoing, and systemic changes that prevent future harm. With our expanded team of allies, Detective Rodriguez, Attorney Santos, Dr. Chen, the music educators, and the restorative justice mediator, we were finally ready to pursue a resolution that would address both the legal and emotional aspects of Mom's betrayal. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine not just the consequences for Mom's crimes, but the future of our family relationships and our ability to rebuild trust after years of systematic deception. 3 weeks later, we gathered in a conference room at the Restorative Justice Center for what would be the most important conversation of our lives. Mom sat across from Marcus, Ophelia, and me, flanked by her court-appointed attorney and Dr. Chen. Detective Rodriguez, Attorney Santos, and mediator Rebecca Martinez were also present, along with representatives from the families affected by the music competition fraud. The session began with Mom reading a prepared statement acknowledging the full scope of her crimes. For the first time in years, she spoke without manipulation excuses or emotional blackmail. I stole $163,000 from my children's trust fund. Mom said, her voice steady, but filled with shame. I forged legal documents, created fake businesses, and manipulated competition results. I turned my children against each other through systematic lies and emotional manipulation. I betrayed the trust of other families in the music community and damaged the integrity of competitions that should have been fair opportunities for young artists. But the most powerful part of her statement was her acknowledgement of the psychological damage she had caused. I made Serafina believe she was less worthy of investment and support than her siblings. I made Ophelia believe her success depended on her sister's sacrifices. I made Marcus believe his family was financially irresponsible and untrustworthy. I destroyed relationships that should have been sources of love and support. And I did it deliberately to maintain my ability to steal money and avoid accountability for my choices. The restorative justice process required Mom to face each person she had harmed individually. When she spoke to me directly, she said the words I had been waiting years to hear. Serafina, you were never the worker bee because you were less talented or less deserving. You were the worker bee because I needed someone to exploit, and you were the most responsible and trustworthy of my children. I took advantage of your love and loyalty to fund my crimes, and I made you complicit in your own financial abuse. I am sorry for stealing your money, your time, your self-respect, and your faith in family relationships. The financial restitution was comprehensive. Mom agreed to surrender all remaining assets, including her house car and personal belongings. The total recovery was $120,000, not enough to cover everything she had stolen, but significant enough to help rebuild our futures. But more importantly, the process established clear boundaries and consequences that would prevent future abuse. Mom would be under court supervision for 5 years, with all financial decisions subject to review. She would be required to attend counseling for both her criminal behavior and her cognitive decline. And she would have no access to any family financial accounts or legal documents. The criminal charges were not dropped entirely. Mom pled guilty to felony embezzlement and fraud, receiving a suspended sentence conditional on completing the restorative justice program and making full restitution. If she violated any terms of the agreement, she would serve 3 years in prison. The music competition fraud had broader consequences. Several contest organizations implemented new oversight procedures to prevent judge bribery. 3 judges who had accepted payments were permanently banned from competitive music events. And a fund was established to provide legitimate scholarships for young musicians from families affected by the fraud. For Ophelia, the resolution was particularly meaningful. She chose to audition again for Juilliard this time, without any purchased advantages or family pressure. Her acceptance letter arrived 6 months later, along with a partial scholarship she had earned entirely through her own talent and hard work. Performing without the weight of fake achievements was terrifying at first, Ophelia told me, but it was also liberating. Every note I play now belongs to me. Marcus used his portion of the recovered money to start his own software consulting business, finally pursuing the entrepreneurial dreams he had abandoned when he believed our family needed his stable corporate income. His business became successful enough that he was able to hire me as his financial manager, allowing me to leave my exhausting dual job situation and focus on completing my CPA certification. But the most unexpected outcome was the relationship that developed between the three siblings. Free from mom's manipulation and competition for resources, we discovered that we genuinely enjoyed each other's company. Marcus and Ophelia both moved back to town, and we began having regular family dinners, not because we felt obligated, but because we chose to. We also built relationships with the other families affected by mom's crimes. The shared experience of being victimized by someone we trusted created bonds that extended beyond the legal resolution. We formed a support group that met monthly sharing strategies for rebuilding trust and managing the complex emotions that come with being betrayed by family members. Dr. Chen became an ongoing resource for our family, helping us navigate mom's continuing cognitive decline while maintaining appropriate boundaries. Mom's dementia progressed more rapidly than initially predicted, and she eventually moved to a specialized care facility paid for through Medicaid and a small family contribution fund that we established. The most profound change was in how I understood myself and my worth. The years of being called the worker bee had convinced me that my value lay only in my usefulness to others. But the process of seeking justice for our family taught me that I deserved respect, honesty, and investment in my own dreams. I completed my CPA certification 18 months later and established my own practice specializing in family financial fraud cases. Working with Dr. Chen and Attorney Santos, I developed expertise in helping other families navigate similar betrayals. My first-hand experience with financial manipulation made me uniquely qualified to recognize the warning signs and help families protect themselves. Looking back, I realized that justice had not looked like what I initially expected. I had wanted Mom to face severe punishment for her crimes, but what actually brought healing was the combination of accountability, restitution, and the rebuilding of honest relationships. The most satisfying moment came 2 years later when Ophelia performed a solo recital at Carnegie Hall. Marcus and I sat in the audience knowing that every note represented her legitimate talent and hard work. After the performance, she dedicated her success to the family that chose to rebuild itself on truth instead of manipulation. As I watched my sister take her final bow, I thought about how the worker bee had finally learned to build her own hive. Sometimes the sweetest revenge is not destroying those who hurt you, but refusing to let their betrayal define your future. Have you ever discovered that everything you believed about your family was built on lies? Have you had to choose between loyalty and justice when someone you love betrayed your trust? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below about how families can rebuild after devastating betrayals like this one. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life drama about family karma and justice served. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear that it is possible to rebuild your life after family betrayal. Thank you for joining me on this journey through one of the most difficult but ultimately transformative experiences of my life. I hope our story shows that sometimes the people who try to make you feel small are just trying to make themselves feel bigger, and that true family is built on honesty, respect, and choosing to love each other despite our flaws. Remember, you are never just the worker bee in someone else's story. You have the power to write your own ending.